Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 25 of the Sandbox.Space weekly podcast. I am your host, Chris, joined as always by baby. Pumpkin is sitting right over here, giving me the evil eye. And, of course, every week we are joined by a special guest. This week's guest is Tom Caprel. How are you, Tom?
Hey, Chris. Longtime baby enjoyer. Really glad to see that they really have a highlight here on the podcast.
I know she's a prime member. I see you are wearing a GDEX shirt. It's always good to see.
I am.
Yeah. We were just talking the other day about our shirts for this year, and so we are we are excited to. It's coming up on us, man. I know it's still like 5 months away, but the year just like flies, dude. It just flies.
I was gonna say GDEX I feel like GDEX, especially in your line of work, is never that far away, no matter how many times a year it happens.
Yeah, it definitely it changes. It's kind of funny. I was talking to somebody about this like last week, but it changes the way your brain works because I'm always having to plan like for that. So I'll be in winter or in spring, but my brain is always in like partly in GDEX mode. So it always feels like fall to me, you know? And then we just put so much work into it and then it happens and then it's over. You know, it's 4 days between load in and the 3-day show, and then it's over. And then we're like, well, yeah, I guess we'll start planning next year's, you know?
Yep.
But people seem to like it. Like, we wouldn't keep doing it if people didn't like it, because it sure as hell doesn't make any money. So, it's a thing of love.
You know what? I've only heard amazing things about it, truly. Like, you know, I've, again, been lucky to been able to be there many times, and everyone I've talked to is always like, I am floored that it's kind of like a hidden gem in the Midwest. So, it's one of those things where, the Midwest still doesn't have many game conventions, truly. I mean, we have a couple things like, C2E2 and a couple other big conventions, but those are kind of general nerd culture stuff, right? They're not necessarily... Oh, there's Pumpkin.
There's Pumpkin.
It's not necessarily like a... it's kind of more of an all-purpose thing, right? So it's great to see that there's more stuff that's really focused on just specifically games, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like GDEX so much. It's just weekend of really great stuff.
Yeah, and this year we've mentioned this on the show before, but this year we're going even bigger. So we're like, I think we're more than triple the size of our show floor last year, which is terrifying because I got to fill it up. But we are right now. We are sold out. I think we're either sold out or real close to being sold out on our artist spaces. Our indie ice spaces are almost sold out, and then our show floor I think is a little over halfway full. Assuming everyone that's like been approved buys a space, they all haven't bought spaces yet, and we haven't even really started our like marketing campaigns yet. That's just kind of through people that have been to GDEX before. So a little bit like behind the curtain for all of our viewers. I would like to have our floor plan and our schedule done by the end of July.
Nice.
So don't know if we can do that, but we're going to try and we're going to see what happens. But we're going to have, also we got some tournaments. We're looking at doing some new tournaments this year, which should be fun.
Oh, cool. Very nice.
And I agree. I think it is kind of a little hidden gem. I would like it to be a little less hidden so that, like I
agreed.
Said, we can make money on it. Because it's always like right at the, I always say like, last year I think we made like 10 grand on it, and that doesn't count any of our time, right? Like if you count our time on it, it's in the red. So I would like to be able to, we're doing a lot better. I think people are really grooving on it being back in fall. We're doing a lot better with volunteers, a lot more interest from sponsors. The universities are obviously more interested because summer, they're just, universities aren't doing anything in summer. So yeah, I think all in all, it's going to be good. I hope that you will come out this year, Tom.
Yes, I'd love to. I gotta, as long as I'm not in Norway, I'll be there. I promise.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll talk offline about cool stuff we can do. Before we get too into it, though, do you want to give a little intro about yourself, what you do, and how you're
Sure.
involved in games and whatnot?
Absolutely. So I always like to start the story with the funny part, which is that I used to be an opera singer. So that was my first life. I sang for a bit and decided it wasn't really for me because turns out your 9 to 5 is sitting in a practice room all by yourself. And hey, guess what? That's not super fun. So I started to get in technology and games and really recognized that gaming is where I wanted to be. So I worked at a bunch of different companies, including uh, lots of startups. I've worked at mobile app companies. I've worked at healthcare companies. I've worked at big data companies, and eventually started my own indie marketing company for games and apps. And I've been doing that for I think it's 7 or 8 years now. Uh, was at NCSoft, the Korean developer, for a while, which you probably know from things like Guild Wars 2 and other developers there. And yeah,
Yeah,
just
heard of it.
I'm really passionate about the games industry, helping indie developers, and yeah, there's just so much cool stuff out there. I feel like there's so many cool niches that I keep exploring all the time, and I don't know, it's always great to be on shows like this and chat with people and do great stuff. So
Awesome. Well, it has been a pleasure having you at GDEX, calling you a friend, doing all these shows. It's been awesome. I think when I think of GDEX and I think of the people I want to have involved as we kind of grow the ecosystem, you're always top of the list, Tom. So I appreciate you joining the show while you are out on vacation. So
absolutely, yeah, no, it's kind of pseudo vacation. So I guess this kind of even ties more into games. So I actually met my partner playing Sea of Thieves like 2 years ago, and she's Norwegian, and so every couple of months or so I go visit her for a bit, and I'm here right now. So I'm lucky to be in a job right now that allows me to work remotely, but it's really cool as I just get to hang out. It's about just after 4 p.m. here in Norway. Well, I think it's about what 10ish a.m. your time. So
it is 10:08 a.m. Eastern
yeah,
Standard Time, the only real time zone. So
it is a very popular one. I will say
it
that.
is. I know. We got New York. New York's holding it down for us.
Mhm. Yeah, you got New York for sure.
All right. Well, why don't we get started? So we have a. Where's my OBS? I got too many damn windows. We have got a lot of wild stuff to talk about today. Tom, you
Love
you
it.
you have come in on a good week, but we'll start off with. I always like to throw in a couple of community things every so often. So let's first start out with, if I can here. Na, na, na. Where is my overlay? No, that's not what I want. Showcase. That's what I want. See, I set it all up and then I just confuse myself. I'm an easily confused man.
You know what? When it comes to tabs, Chris, I don't know what to tell you. I get confused too.
Yeah. All right. So the first thing here, this is from Polygon, from Ollie Welsh. So Microsoft clearly still cares about Game Pass exclusives, or exclusives not so much. This is a reflection on the Games Pass Xbox showcase. I don't know if you watched that or not.
I did watch part of it. Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. Two of the most telling bits of news emerged outside the boundaries of the show itself. The first was confirmation that more than a week before the show, Call of Duty Black Ops 6 will be released on Game Pass on day one. Gasp. The second, which is not mentioned by Microsoft in the show, but slipped out as a press release, is that Doom the Dark Ages is also coming to PlayStation 5, which I think is pretty cool and not totally unexpected, I don't think. I feel like Doom is one of those games that's been multi-platform and that has
Yeah.
been part of its success. But of course, let's turn this off. You do have to ask yourself, when you go and buy these companies, are you going to want to do exclusives? And it seems like Microsoft is not doubling down on subscriptions. They are really obviously pushing on their Games Pass, which is going to come into another article, which is going to be our main article later. But I'm going to throw that one as a surprise to you. So I'm
Nice.
curious.
Love it.
I'm curious your thoughts on just sort of the ecosystem of Games Pass and exclusives in general. We've seen over the past probably 4 years, and I think some of this has to do with kind of COVID and just the weirdness around console releases. But we've seen even Sony has been putting some of their, you got Last of Us, Horizon. I think they just were mentioning, what game were they just mentioning? I totally blanked. But they were mentioning another game they're putting out on PC. So they're not putting these games out on Xbox necessarily, but they're coming out on PC, which I think, when you think about exclusive, you know,
Yeah.
the definition of exclusive, I guess, is changing. So I'm curious your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time, especially if you're focusing on Game Pass. I've been listening to a lot of different people talk about Game Pass recently and doing a lot of research on it because I think it's a very interesting model that I still don't 100% know how they are making money effectively with, just because, again, if you're putting a significant amount of your games on Game Pass day one, and that's everything from indie games to AAA games. I'm always I'm fascinated by that as a business model because I I think and I think what this has to do with a little bit is Microsoft has pretty much openly said that they have lost the console war, right? They can't catch up. I think the quote was like something like, "We know we can't catch up to current generation stuff like that in the ability right now." So I think that what is happening is they are kind of um trying to put their tentacles out, and again, it's Microsoft, so they have tentacles bound into different areas to see what they are really going to catch on to, right? And how they can make money in maybe some new and exciting ways. I think part of that strategy was kind of their purchase of Activision Blizzard King, right? I mean, that was probably
Oh, you threw the
some of the
king in
biggest.
there. Classy.
Yeah, yep, yeah. No, I have some friends that work for King, so I have to throw that in every time, or else it doesn't feel right.
Okay.
But it's one of those things that I feel like that they are working up more on the IP side and trying to be an IP Behemoth, right, as opposed to kind of a hardware Behemoth that I think they used to want to be. Um, so that it's interesting, right? Again, I don't know how they're making money off of it. I think that they are right now probably using it as a way to get people into their ecosystem and then keep them in. I think eventually there's gonna be more ways that they're gonna make money through it. I think right now they're just trying to get as many people as possible using Game Pass, and using their subscription services, and then trying to do more upsells from there. So, because at least in my mind, right, when you have again these kind of like tentpole series that they're announcing that are coming out on day one, right, you have to think that at least in my mind, right, and I think the way that it used to function was is that they would um they would have a game that would release, and then a year or two later they'd release it on Game Pass, right? For everyone else who maybe didn't try it,
Yeah.
kind of as a benefit for them.
For
Um,
stage setting, too, just for the
yeah,
audience, like the term exclusive used to mean exactly what it sounded like, which was this game
yep,
is on this platform and only this platform, and it will never be on any other platform. Then we started using the term timed exclusives, which is what, oh, okay, this game's going to come out on Xbox, and then a year later it'll be open for PlayStation or whatever, or other platforms. Microsoft actually got into some hot water on that about, I want to say 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, probably longer now because we're all crazy old people. But when they announced the first Tomb Raider like remake, whenever that came out, 2013,
yeah,
whatever. And they used the term exclusive during the press presentation. I think it was E3. Um, and then the press started asking questions about it, and they were like, "Wait, it says in your press release here that it's going to be eventually released, so this isn't really exclusive." And they're like, "Well, it's exclusive for right now." And they're like, "What does that mean?" Like they intentionally used verbiage that was kind of deceitful. Um, and now we're at the point where I don't even know what exclusive means because, like I said, Sony kind of like it's exclusive as long as Sony says they want it to be exclusive, and then it's not anymore.
yeah,
You know, and I guess that's
yeah.
words don't mean anything these days.
Well, and I wonder too, right? Like, as a having been in marketing, I always try to give a little bit of leeway to a lot of these marketing teams. It's entirely possible that they said, someone told them, all right, throw exclusive on everything, right?
Yeah.
And we'll go from there.
Let
And
me
then
interrupt you real
turns out their
fast,
business
Tom,
plan was
because this is
different.
this is
Yeah.
why I love you. You're coming at it from this marketing angle. Like even in your first like set of things you were talking about, because I have these conversations with my students, and you're just being like, you're coming at it from all the angles, all the different, and that's why I love talking to you. So just I've just blown
Appreciate it,
some
man.
just blowing some smoke up, yeah, for before your
I
response.
No. I always appreciate it, Chris. I always take a
You
compliment.
appreciate a
Even
good
though
smoking.
yes, you can say that, especially now that it's legal in California.
Yeah,
But
and Ohio.
the yes, and Ohio, yep,
Yep.
and Germany now too, which is very interesting. So yeah, it's something where I always thought too, if you were trying to keep the quote unquote hype train of game going, that the sort of limited run exclusive would be something that would continue, right? So it'd be like you release a game full price, get everybody excited about it, then probably in between that game and the first real expansion, you're going to release it onto some sort of Game Pass, right? To again keep people excited about it, right? A whole new way people come in. Then you release the first DLC that's associated with it. Everybody gets hyped about that too, right? Because the idea is you want to, especially with live service games, right? You want to keep that sort of that hype moving as far as you can, and I think that there's so much more money in the live service model that it's really interesting again to see that they're going for day one on a lot of this stuff where I don't know, maybe they've done the math somewhere that says like, hey, turns out actually we're not going to lose any money if we do this, or maybe they are willing to lose money to get people in the ecosystem. I think what PlayStation is doing is interesting as well because again, I think that they are um they've kind of pulled ahead again in the technology war, and there's really no serious competitors now outside of handheld stuff. I mean the PlayStation 5 is and again I'm not just saying this from my perspective. I'm saying this from perspective of a lot of people that I trust and a lot of research that I've done, a lot of articles that I've seen. Um, there's just no reaching them right now, right? And so they're kind of in this interesting position where they can kind of lock down pretty hard because they're the what's left of the console wars, right? And so now that they have functionally pulled ahead in that, and without with Microsoft kind of pulling back and saying like, okay, we're not super interested in that anymore. I wonder what's going to happen with that. Maybe they are going to go much harder in the exclusive market in that way to make sure that they can do that. I would love to see them do a little bit better of maybe diversifying that exclusivity after a certain period of time. I think it's taken way too long to get Horizon out on PC. Like I think like stuff like
Sure.
that, right? That's kind of these tentpole series
Well,
that
that was going to
I
be
again
a question to you: is
so
are exclusives even sort of needed or necessary nowadays? I don't know.
I think if you ask, yeah, that's a good question. I think if you ask the average consumer, I think they're going to say no, because I think generally exclusivity feels bad sometimes as a consumer. I
Sure.
think it kind of forces you to spend more money maybe in ways that you don't want to. I
Oh,
think in a boardroom setting,
I'm pissed off that
yeah,
the Outer Worlds 2 is going to be Xbox exclusive. At least supposedly as
yeah,
of now, that could change because I did really enjoy the Outer Worlds. And then when Bethesda got bought and they announced that, I was like, well, because I only pretty much play on PlayStation nowadays.
yeah, absolutely. I think from a boardroom setting, I think it's very easy to use that as a way to protect kind of certain monetary value. I think again, I think, and I hate to tie this into kind of like broader things in general, but I think right now, especially with whatever you've seen, the layoffs in the gaming industry that affected so many people I know, myself included, right? I mean, there's so many things that have happened recently where it's very clear that the business objective of games has uh, separated pretty heavily from, I would say, the entertainment objective of games, to the point where I think that uh, right now, I think the way that people are making money now, I don't think is going to be the same in 5 to 6 years when kind of all of these issues come to roost. You can't go through all of these layoffs right now. You can't go through all of these changes right now. You can't go through mass changes in exclusivity now and expect that not to hurt your bottom line in a certain period of time. But with CEO bonuses and other things like that that are set on really short pay periods, those people may not even be empowered by that time anyway, and they've already got their
Sure.
golden parachute. They don't care.
Yeah.
So I think to answer your question in a much broader way, do I think it's good? Exclusivity is good? No. Do I think that people are going to do pretty much anything they can to make stop price go up? Yes. So
Yeah. Yeah. Exclusivity for me. So you talked a lot about the business and marketing angle. I also like to bring in the developer angle, which is that when you are working on, let's say you are a Naughty Dog or whatever, and you only develop for PlayStation, right? That allows you to get a real deep understanding of the hardware and architecture that third-party developers just don't get. Because if you're going to be putting it
yep.
on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, you're kind of trying to go for lowest common denominator in a lot of ways, which is why something like a Unity and Unreal Engine is super useful, because you can do multi-platform. If you don't care about it coming out on Xbox, then you can really dig into the architecture, which is why if you go back to like 2013 and The Last of Us Part 1 came out on the PlayStation 3, why that game looked fucking phenomenal. It's because they just had this internal expertise about the hardware that third-party developers just didn't have, because their resources are spread through other work, right? And it saves you a ton of time on QA and testing. If you only have to test one device, you're like, I'm developing a game for PlayStation 5. We only have to test it on PlayStation 5. If it works on this PS5, it's probably going to work on every other PS5. That is not the case with PC, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So I can see as a developer, there's definitely a lot of stress and weight removed when you're just working on one thing, as long as the finances work, if it's financially viable to do that, right? But I also think, real fast, you hit on something interesting. I didn't expect this first article to really dig in like this, so that's great. But you mentioned how, in essence, that the economics and monetization of games is kind of divorcing itself from the artistry of the games. And this is something that's existed since the beginning, because games and commerce were always sort of synonymous, right? Like from the
Yep.
beginning, games were designed to make money, whether it was in arcades or whatever, coin op stuff. And I think that has allowed that, plus the fact that we're on the cutting edge of tech more than any other industry, has allowed the door to be open to try a lot of monetization schemes that aren't always, I think, can range from not being the sort of best or the easiest to understand to being downright malicious. In some ways.
Openly predatory for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
And I think that's unfortunate, because I do view games as an art form, and I do think that they're important. And I do have a sort of a line in the sand of acceptability that I have found over time has been sort of buttressed against, that I've needed to either push back and be like, all right, well, I'm just not buying your game, or I need to acquiesce in some way. Things like season passes and subscription services. Like the idea used to be, if you were doing a subscription service, you weren't paying for the game. And now there's exceptions to that rule, like, I don't know, Warcraft or whatever, or that was like a behemoth of a game. But now it's like, okay, now I'm paying $40 to $60 for the game, and there's a season pass I have to buy for $20, and then it's getting. Plus, you mentioned the predatory stuff, all the like Skinner box, loot box stuff is like, it's getting. I feel the past few years people have pulled back, and again, maybe that's because of COVID, where money was tight and game companies realized they needed to be careful about how they monetize stuff. But I don't think that's always going to be the case. I think we're going to come back to it.
Yeah.
So
I think so too. And it's one of those things that I think that looking at the industry objectively is really important. I think it's very easy to look at the gaming industry kind of as a whole, in the kind of what I'd consider, kind of one of the main things that people consider, right? Which is PlayStation, Xbox, and
Nintendo
Nintendo as like the big three. But the reality of it is that over And it's been like this for years that over 50% of gaming is mobile gaming, right? Like it's almost to
Yeah,
the point where
the
I wonder
largest
if
gaming platform in the world is iOS devices.
yeah.
If you look at it
So
just from a pure platform standpoint.
right. So it's one of those things where, and I even think about this too, that if one day that, those are going to even be considered different, not even a part of the gaming industry in the same way, right? Like, I think that the industry's gotten so big and is starting to, kind of diversify in so many ways and go off in their own direction. I wonder if that's going to be something where like, the future mobile is going to be looked at very differently and may not even be considered in the same realm as a lot of stuff is going on. And I think it's really easy for people to think about kind of again but these companies follow where the money is, right? So it's I appreciate your point though. It's kind of been that way since the beginning, which is kind of wild to me that it's something I kind of forget about.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff we allow in the gaming space that like movies would never allow, or at least movies obviously now have become much more commercialized. Everything's becoming
Mhm.
much more commercialized. You got to squeeze every ounce of juice you can out of every product, every IP and franchise. You have to beat into a bloody pulp. But yeah, so just in the interest of time, because I didn't think this was going to be this long, I want to jump to the big one because I think
Okay.
this ties in nicely with what we were talking about. I don't know if you saw this article. So this is IGN India, but I don't know who the author is. And Ritra Bohamic, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, but hopefully I was close. Xbox next gen console to reportedly serve as a reference device for manufacturers. Here's what you need to know. The latest rumors suggest Xbox will be significantly different gaming device compared to its predecessors, implying that the forthcoming Xbox generation will mark a radical shift in traditional gaming hardware strategy. In essence, what they are saying here is, and this was on a tweet, will be a reference device for manufacturers, is that they might be going pure PC ecosystem, and that the Xbox itself is not a device you buy from Microsoft, but instead is a set of schematics in which other manufacturers can create their own Xbox. So there could be an Asus Xbox and a Dell Xbox and a whatever. That is a big move, man. But it seems to be in line with a company that, like you said, feels like they lost the console war and is really pushing the digital ecosystem play. So, ball is in your court.
Yeah.
What's the answer?
No, I think it's really smart. I've also seen a lot too that I think they're going to go much more into handhelds too, which I think is very interesting, right? I think that there are um I think it's so interesting to almost like commercially democratize the Xbox, right? Where Xbox becomes a concept. But I think that they've even been going that way for a while, right? Whether that's having to use your Xbox Live account to sign into games, right, all over the place, where it's not because it easily could have just been just Windows, right, and they could have folded it into the Windows ecosystem. But I really think that they are trying to differentiate and use the Xbox IP as the way to get people excited about it. I think it's smart too because I think that they are starting to address what probably is their biggest segment, which is Windows gamers, right? You think about people playing Windows on some sort of a either desktop or laptop. That's mostly where people are playing games within their ecosystem, right? I mean, Xbox has had a traditional Xbox, right? The actual console that you plug into your TV has had slower and lower market share every year, but PC gaming is only increasing. So it's one of those things where, at least I think it is. But it's one of those things where I think it makes a lot of sense. I would be fascinated to see what that actually means, right? Does that mean you're gonna buy like a Xbox ready computer? Is that something that you can then customize? Is it going to be completely locked down? Is it going to be something where you could buy like are they going to partner with RTX and have like the Xbox 4090 or something like that where it'll be, um customized or locked into Microsoft games in some way, right? Because if you think about it, there's a lot of ways for them also to then say like, oh, if you're going to buy Xbox parts, it only works with Xbox games, so you better sign into that. So
Yeah, so I mean, we don't know what this is going to look like, right? This is a
Of course,
this is
yeah.
a leaked rumor. We're kind of just blue skying, but that's what this show is about. It's about talking about the games industry and the what could be and whatnot. And I think that this is a potentially foundationally rocking change. I think, and history has proven this out, that the games industry has worked well with a kind of three pillar approach, being recently Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo. And of course, you in the past you had like, Sony, Sega, Nintendo. Like it seems like whenever we get four or five, there's two that get cut off. We cut the chaff off. I'm worried. Well, a couple of things. First of all, like you were mentioning, what does this even mean for consumers? Like, okay, I'm going to buy this Xbox. You've now opened up the door that you're going to have complications with software and conflicts, and are you going to have to start downloading drivers and updates, which is like the main fucking reason I don't play on PC, because I'm a busy guy, and when I sit down, I want to be able to put a game in and play the game, and I don't want to be messing around with compatibility issues and downloading drivers and screwing around with Windows. Keeping in mind, I grew up in the 80s and 90s when Windows was a pile of junk. I realize it's better now, but still, it's also one of the main reasons I still use Mac. I like my Apple devices because it friggin' works when it should.
Sure.
And if you are gonna, do you want to get down, sweetheart? If you're gonna start having all these different things, then developers are gonna have to start taking all that into account. And then, are there going to be pre-approved? I imagine there has to be some like Microsoft Xbox seal of quality on parts. So one of the cool things is, like, for example, I've got a PS5. The rumors of PS5 Pro are coming out. As a side note, Xbox did announce updated Series S and X consoles are coming out this year. So I have been guessing that a PS5 Pro is going to be coming out this season, this holiday season, and that seems to be more and more right. But anyway, I'm kind of waiting for an upgraded PS5. But like, if I was able to just like buy a PS5 graphics card update and just take it out and stick it in like a Nintendo 64 memory booster or whatever, that necessarily wouldn't be so bad. But I'm just not convinced that it's not going to cause a whole bunch of potential compatibility issues down the road.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what they do too from an OS perspective, right? So, let's say these are, because I know that you've seen this as a developer, but when I think this goes back to what you're saying earlier, when people get these sort of demo systems to test their games on, they don't always look like you might expect, right? I'm sure you've seen a lot of demo systems too. It just kind of looks like a box, right? The development systems sometimes you get don't have all the fancy cases on them. Really, if you think about it, these consoles really are small computers, right? I mean, when you think about it. It'll be very interesting to see if they are just going to go the route of, again, remaking what the same level of what the new Xbox would be, but just in a PC case, right? I mean, is it going to be something where they have a customized Xbox OS? Or is it just reskinned Microsoft, right? Like, is it what can you do on this? Is it a computer that you can use normally, right? Like,
yeah,
so.
it sounds like they may be shifting more to a Windows-based platform as well, which is kind of funny because that's what Bill Gates wanted to do originally with the Xbox. And then I also wonder, this is sort of a marketing thing, like, okay, like if you have all these different schematics, these schemas for devices, like what's the competitive advantage for a Dell or an Asus or whatever when you're selling your Xbox? How is your Xbox going to be better than your competitor's Xbox if the spec sheets are requiring such and such a thing, right? So the more that Microsoft cracks down, and I imagine they have to crack down pretty heavily on the first generation of this, there's no way they're just going to let manufacturers willy-nilly create Xboxes, for the first. So they're going to have to kind of really have kind of firm spec requirements. What are what's your Alienware Xbox going to do that your Asus Xbox can't or whatever? I'm just picking random names out for PC
Yeah,
manufacturing, but
and I imagine
is
what they're
Sony
gonna
going to make
do
an
to.
Xbox?
Yeah, right. The Sony Xbox get really confusing. I think more than likely what they're going to do is set a minimum set of requirements, right? This that are going to have to work with, right? Certain architecture requirements.
Yeah.
But
So it's just a
I think
PC at that
beyond
point
that,
then.
pretty much, yeah. I think that's what's going to happen. I think they're just going to set certain minimum requirements and then let them go crazy, right? Same because all the where those companies make their money is, kind of like the upgraded high-end systems, right? If you think about it, right? They're not looking to make. I mean, of course they're going to make a new base Xbox box, whatever that's going to be, but then they're going to make one, outfitted with, the, you know, i9, 4090 with green water cooling and all the other stuff that everyone's
Yeah.
come to expect from really high-end PCs now anyway. And then they're gonna, upcharge that add a couple $1,000s on top of that, and that's where they're gonna make a lot of their money. Um, yeah, it is very interesting because I think that it'll be interesting too to see how, like, I think it is going to be relatively more accepted because I think that I mean, I know that you kind of grew up this way, having, with computers that you had to mess around with a lot. I grew, same thing, right? I built my own computer and mess around with stuff a lot. But, I know that Gen Z is like much less interested in that and really just kind of wants things to work. They kind of grew up on grew up in iPad and iOS, right? Or similar
Yeah.
things where they don't want to go into file systems and mess with stuff. They don't want to have to, troubleshoot hardware issues. They just want it to work. So I'm wondering if it's going to be more towards that, where they're looking for something that's going to be, much more app-based, much more straightforward, and less of the kind of, stereotypical Windows file system that you're used to, because I think that's where it's going, right? I think that's where I think that as, people become a bit more divorced from the actual workings of a computer, they just, again, they want to be able, to get it to work. So it'd be very interesting too how they're going to integrate AI in that as well, right? I mean, that's the hot thing right now.
God.
And a lot of these, I mean, again, I know it's not perfect, but I also don't think it's going away. I think that,
AI?
a
Oh
lot
no,
of,
no, not at all.
yeah, I think a lot of the AI assistants, especially with Apple's new, like, doubling down into updated Siri that can now do a lot more. I think Windows is going to go the same way. I think there's going to be a lot more uh AI support in a lot of that as well. That's hopefully that, maybe can take care of some of those issues or maybe help out with some of that or make things a lot faster, right? So it'll be interesting to see if that actually takes shape in that way or what that would look like.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's man, just being in the games industry is so wild, isn't it? Like stuff's always changing, and I just hope that I always want it to change for the better, but I'm also like an old grumpy man now, where I've seen it just over time, and I do worry if there's a world where there is only Nintendo and Sony and PC. My concern is that I love PlayStation. I like Sony. They're a lot better now than they have been in the past. But they still tend to be a very conservative company in many ways. I mean, business wise. And they tend to make things so, like, a lot of the cross-play concerns between
Yeah.
games. A lot of those issues are because Sony doesn't want to open up their
Yep.
platform as of course, because they're in the lead. They don't need to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's annoying when I play, like, Path of Exile, or I don't know, Fallout 76, or some of these other games. I was just like, why can I not play with other people on other platforms? It would just make the environment, the ecosystem, so much better. And so I think that it's a concern that without a force like Microsoft, even this console generation, right? Like, COVID hit. I don't know if you remember, but like, we didn't have any info about these consoles until, like, it was like late July or August, and they were coming out in like 3 months.
Yes.
Like, we didn't have release dates, we didn't have prices, because they were both waiting to see what the other one was going to price their unit at before they jumped in it, and then they ended up both kind of settling on the same price. And that was not a coincidence, obviously. But having that push and pull, and they're like, okay, well, there was that moment, and then when Microsoft realized it was getting its ass handed to it, it created Games Pass. Games Pass would not exist if Xbox was the leading dominant console. Like, I just do not believe that they created Games Pass as a service because they realized they were not getting enough units sold, which means they're not selling enough software on their platform, and they needed another mechanism to sell software. And so they created this Games Pass subscription, which then forced PlayStation into updating their PlayStation Plus subscription. So all in all, because of that competition, like, this is one of those, people gripe about capitalism, and there's plenty to gripe about, but this is one of those instances where the push and pull of the marketplace led to better products and better value for the consumer. Without that push and pull, I worry that a company like a Sony that just has such a dominant force, I don't know if they'd be willing to acquiesce to some of these things. I could be wrong. I rarely am, but I could be.
No, I think it's a really good question, right? And if you think about now, again, like you were talking about, the noticing that they were weak in the hardware sector made them, force them to identify other business areas that would be good for them, and that was their IP, right? They knew that they had good IP. They knew that they could come out, swinging with that IP, and then purchase a bunch more, right? Embracer thought it could do the same thing, and we still saw that went right.
Well,
you really need to have
that's because
right?
Embracer sucks ass.
Yeah, I can't. That company did terrible things, so I feel really, really, really bad for the companies that it bought and then just liquidated. I have a lot of friends that got laid off and kicked out for that, and it's including people that are leaving the game industry forever from that. It's so sad. But I think that I think that it'll be very interesting 10 years from now, right? Like, because my concern, like very much like you're talking about, is now we're gonna have three camps, right? Where Nintendo dominates the handheld completely. Microsoft has completely gone into IP and then, some associated hardware with it, with the Xbox brand. And then Sony owns all the console, right? And essentially then you have three monopolies in those areas, and there's not a whole lot else that you're going to be able to do to get better things, right?
Totally. And people will jump in and be like, well, you'll have PC. It's like, yeah, but PC is still a monopoly. It's just wearing different clothes. There might be different manufacturers of hardware, but you are playing those games on a Microsoft Windows system, unless you're a super nerd and you're in Linux world or something.
Yeah. So yeah, and even if you if we're just focusing on hardware, then it would just be, handheld gaming PCs and then, consoles, right? And then even then, that's still its own, thing like that. And I think that's I think own monopoly in that sense, right? And I think that, again, you saw a lot of people, talking about, was the government going to allow the ABK merger to go through with Microsoft? I think that if a lot of these companies try to get any bigger, I think they're going to be flirting with, some potential regulatory issues at some point, right? It'll be very interesting to see if that takes place.
Going back to our exclusivity conversation, I mean, I would not be surprised if some of the behind closed doors legal conversations is the reason why Doom is not exclusive. Just trying to. Yeah, I'm obviously finances. These people aren't stupid, right? Like, they're running the numbers on everything behind the scenes, so they know what things are. But I think they are being very careful about making things. Outer Worlds 2, I love that game. No one gives a shit about that game. It's not a super big property. If it goes exclusive, the FEC is not knocking on anyone's door, right? Like. Sure. But if obviously Call of Duty can never go exclusive.
Yeah, they can't. That's too much of a leader. Yeah.
But there's plenty of other products that are sort of tiptoeing on that line. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, again, I think it's going to be very interesting, especially with the growth of some of the new chip design stuff that I've heard recently coming out, some of the new, again, stuff with AI. I think what gaming looks like now is going to look drastically different in 10 years. Like 10 years ago from now, like if we're thinking 2014, again, I don't think it was super different, right? I think that there was a lot of things that were kind of the seeds of where we are now have kind of grown. But I think that there is going to be, whether it was the pandemic, whether it was other things, I think there's going to be major changes that are happening.
Oh,
That I
for
think the
sure.
industry is going to look a lot different 10 years from now than it did, than the
Yeah,
last 10 years.
I'm sort of positive, bullish, but also skeptical, scared of AI because I think it has besides the robots taking over the world and murdering us all component of it. I just, again, grumpy old man here. Like I remember the internet. There's a phrase that I love. I say it all the time, and I think I got it from. There's a book that I read about. Man, off this. It's called The Paradox of Choice. Maybe I'll post it in the show notes or whatever. It's a great book. But he has a saying that like everything was better back when everything was worse. And I feel like the internet is that way in a lot of ways, where it's like the old internet in the 90s and 2000s was like, it just way worse than it is today in many ways, right?
Yeah.
But the thing was, like nowadays, it is just so covered with ads and bullshit, and people are talking about, oh well, what I get approached about Web 3.0, like what do you think about Web 3.0? What kind of exciting stuff? I was like, I think it's going to be a garbage dumpster fire of marketing stuff. Even look at, I lost my mind the other day, Tom. I came back. I pulled myself back. But Google's new WebP image format, when you save images off the line, that I hate. That thing is fucking annoying. It's totally unnecessary, and it just makes the experience of using the internet far worse. And it's only going to get worse. We've tolerated DRM. I think HDCP on your TV to prevent people from like copying stuff off of streaming. I think that technology needs to go because all it does is inconvenience people who actually are trying to do. Like, there's times I have a 77-inch OLED like top tier TV, and there's times where sometimes the screen will just go blank for like a couple of seconds because it's probably lost some HDCP handshake between the PlayStation and the TV.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all this does is inconvenience the consumer. It doesn't stop piracy. It doesn't protect IP. If you want to steal the next Netflix show, there's somebody out there who already figured out how to crack it. And so I feel like AI is going to be in a similar boat where it's just going to be like a lot of nonsense. Dude, even my car, there's no way for me to turn off like all these like beeps and bloops in my car. It's constantly dinging me about stuff.
I know.
I was like,
Notification.
I don't care, man. I don't care.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
End
To
rant.
me, no, totally. I totally get it. I think that notification fatigue is a real problem. I think people are hoping that AI is going to solve some of that. Again, I'm not anti. I think I don't like what generative AI is doing in trying to take people's jobs. I think that's a huge mistake. I think positioning that in the market was a huge mistake. I think they made enemies for life. I think the concept of AI is not necessarily a bad one. I think that they were very stupid to train them off of some really, really public things and then just kind of just think that they're going to destroy IP. But I think IP's there's a reason why there's a very big department of IP in our government, and I think that they're going to come back and really, OpenAI is not bigger than the concept of IP. I think that they're going to strike back pretty hard on a lot of these companies, and I hope that they do, because people, deserve to not have their work copied, right?
Sure.
I think that there are other things, again, about AI that could be very cool, that could provide some cool stuff. I think, and again, it's hard, right? Because people, when they hear AI, they think immediately like generative AI stuff, and the reality of it is that's kind of like not the full extent of what that is. And I think that I think it's good to remember that AI as a concept is not just OpenAI's generative AI processes, right? Writing content or creating images or video. That's their AI has a lot other things that are happening, that are going to be happening at the business level, that are going to be impacting stuff pretty intensely. I think that next is going to be a lot of these companies opening, kind of having private AI, right? That's going to take, use their own system, their own private data to be able to do some of that, and then try to build stuff there for the consumer that's going to be helpful for them. I think it's a lot. I actually, believe it or not, I think it's better than Web3. I think Web3 was a huge mistake. I think that people that got behind Web3 um, were mostly grifters. I think a lot of the people that
Oh, totally.
adopted early generative AI
Totally.
were also hugely grifters. And I think that
I mean, it smells of
I mean,
blockchain, kind of.
oh, 100%, right? And but I also know that the barrier to entry for AI use is so much lower than Web3 was, that it has penetrated in ways that I don't think people have expected. Like, I talk to my coworkers all the time, and like half of them have used AI at some point or use it regularly for things, right? And it's one of those things where I think that that's not necessarily going to go away, because it does make some things a lot easier. But again, if you can't do it by, if you can't protect IP, if you can't go back and help some of that stuff, like, these companies are going to be in big trouble, and a lot of people are going to be in big trouble. So, I think, yeah, man, I could talk about this all day. I've done a lot of research on AI recently because of, I think, I work in marketing technology. I spend a lot of time in marketing technology, and I think a lot about it because I do think it's going to be transformative. I think it will end up impacting gaming pretty intensely in the next 10 years. I think, again, if people are going to do it right, they have to do it by not destroying the livelihood of other people. Um, and yeah,
Oh, you
it's
sweet
going to be.
summer child.
I know, but it's one of those things that
No, I'm with you. I
it's
just don't think
yeah.
it's. I think when you are the one of the sort of core issues with capitalism, and I'm not speaking out of turn here. This is in like the first chapter of Wealth of Nations, the guidebook of liberal free market capitalism, is that the free market does not have any governors on it for
Mhm.
like gold rushes, right? Like
Yep.
if there is opportunity, and that's one of its strengths too, is if there's opportunity, it encourages people to really dig in and go towards that opportunity. But the problem is that it doesn't care about the bodies along the way.
Yeah.
And I think it's problematic. I mean, again, the first chapter of Wealth of Nations mentions the need for efficient and powerful regulation on the free market by like government forces to sort of provide these guardrails. And I know
Yeah.
we've used AI. We mostly use the generative component for things like quick concept art, environmental art. If we're like creating like a design document, or we're doing some design sessions or whatever, it's an easy way for us to like create things to look at that we can comment on. But we don't ever use that art's never in any kind of final product, right? It just helps
Yeah.
the design sessions. So we definitely use that in the past. And I mean, I'm all for if we can get like Star Trek level AI where it takes care of all the mundane stuff. That's great. I think
That's yeah.
the problem with a lot of that is that AI can't do that work. The stuff that would allow us to have a 3 or 4 day, weekend and a 3 or 4 day work
Mhm.
week. A lot of that stuff is stuff that just cannot be automated at a base level, at least right now. Um,
Yeah.
but
Well, and
I'm
I
with
think
you.
that, yeah, no, it's going to be very interesting, and I've read a lot about this, right? Where at some point I think that things are going to be have to, not that we're going to be boxed out of our own stuff, but I think that things are going to be designed more for computers to interface with than people. And if you think about, I think that how that might impact gaming is that, um, let's say, I don't know, 10 years from now, AI assistants are a huge part of everyone's life. How do you, as an indie developer, write your content in a way that's digestible more for AI than it is for human beings? Let's say, Steam has AI suggestions, like how, and they're notoriously tight-lipped in how they do anything on their platform.
Yeah.
How, there's going to be whole sites dedicated to, how to best create your game to make sure that you have the right AI ready, right? Like, let's
Isn't that
say,
just the following the algorithms? I mean, we do that nowadays, right?
yeah, it can be,
To the
but I mean,
extreme.
yeah, to the extreme. And I think that's what it is, right? Because at least in following the algorithms, you're still writing content that's meant to be at some point consumed by people. I think at some point people are going to have to create things very much like developers do now, that uh, it's almost like that the concept of software and development has creeped into everything, right? Wherever it is, for better or worse. And I think that that's going to impact games really significantly coming up too, where people are going to have to start thinking about things from a completely different perspective. And who knows who those consumers might be? Is there going to be is there always going to be a machine in between the end consumer and the person who's creating it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, there's platforms, but platforms are a way for one person to distribute to other people. At some point, is there always going to be an AI in between those two that's making that transaction happen? There's so many questions that I have about that, right? I mean, because I think um, yeah, I also think we've reached again kind of what I've heard called like kind of the peak of where generative or this kind of level of AI can get us. But even that is going to change a lot of stuff in the next 10 years because
Sure.
um
So I'm gonna
so
I'm gonna interrupt you real fast just because there's an article
yeah,
that we gotta wrap up a little bit around 11.
of course.
But there's an article that I think having you on the show I would be remiss if we didn't talk about. So this is on I think this is an opinion piece or an editorial on GameIndustry.biz. We didn't even get into the article about how IGN just bought all of these news agencies, which is that's a whole other. We could
Oh
talk an
yeah,
hour about
I
that.
did see that. That's wild.
But I just curious your thoughts from a game developer standpoint. This article, and again, these will all be in the Sandbox.Space's weekly email. So go to the Sandbox.Space and sign up. Mock reviews and game evaluations. What are they and why are they useful for devs? Don't have time to go through the article. This was written by Emma Kent, was a contributor. Again, games industry about this. But I'm just curious your thoughts in a 2-minute wrap up. On your thoughts on mock reviews and game evaluations. Are they useful? Are they not useful? Are there lessons we can take away from them?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're incredibly useful. I think that you as a developer, especially if we're thinking about indie devs, right, should always be doing some sort of market testing for the stuff that you're doing. And one of the hard part is you want to make sure you're not necessarily doing it to other game developers, but the actual end user of your game, the people that would be playing who don't know anything about games, right? Or maybe who only know very little. And I think that having, kind of very open feedback, whether that's in, you being able to create a community, whether it's on Discord or somewhere else, to make sure to get that feedback immediately, maybe having a form that people fill out that, go through the review process. Maybe, talk to, find someone who is a professional game reviewer and talk to them about the stuff that they, look at, or if someone has done reviews beforehand, right? I think it's incredibly important because I think that as a developer, it's so easy to be too close to the thing that you're making, right? I mean, it's hard when you're creating anything, art, software, anything like that, right? When you're really close to it, and it's hard to kind of maybe zoom back and see everything that's going on, and see maybe things that might be relevant to you, but may not necessarily be relevant to other people. Biases that you might have, and I don't mean biases in the negative way. I mean in like just the how we look at the world way.
Sure.
And it's one of those things that I think it can be incredibly helpful, and I think that I always encourage people to do that. I actually had a talk once where I was talking to people. I was like, hey, make sure to get your game out in people that aren't game developers, because otherwise and I actually think this was at GDEX, or else you may not know whether or not this is actually going to be impactful. And some of the audience went, oh, that's what we did. And it was super funny just to see like that moment connect for them, that they tried this game, they had it in front of a bunch of other developers at a conference. Developers liked it, it was really cool. They released it and realized they didn't really have that sort of audience there, right? I mean, you have to do a lot of community building, especially as an indie developer. And I know that it's really hard to do because you're developing the game and you're marketing the game and doing everything in part of it. But that's why people hire companies like mine to help out with community marketing, other stuff like that. That's why they hire publishers. Like, I totally get it. So
Indeed. Yeah, that's a great wrap up. I tell my students all the time, and this applies to the show, the guests on the show, the audience for the show, is remember that, like, as weird as it sounds, we are not the representative gamers. We are in it. We are in it. We are getting, my students are getting a degree in it. I have created several businesses in the industry. We sit here and talk about it for an hour. The average gamer is someone who buys like 1 to 3 games a year. They might buy Call of Duty, and maybe, you know, if a big title like a God of War or something pops up, they'll go and buy that. They have an Xbox or a PlayStation that they play for, you know, 2 to 4 hours a week. That's the average gamer, game purchaser. They're not somebody that's got like 10,000 games in their Steam library and sits around and, you know, plays games like it's a second job, right? So it is important. Not that one is better than the other, or you should, you know, not be paying attention to one over the other, but just remember as a developer that if you're creating, particularly if you're creating like a really deep kind of game that has a lot of systems and RPG elements or whatever in it, that there is a vocabulary to video games. And if you expect somebody to like, you open the door and then you kick them in and you're like, okay, go fly this rocket ship, they're going to be a little lost and they're probably going to hurt somebody, right? So it is important to get different thoughts and opinions on that. Well, Tom, we have reached our time. I wish we didn't, but I have another meeting that I have to, otherwise I would keep chatting. But Tom, I really appreciate you being here. Is there any place that you can let people know that where they can get in contact with you or learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, totally. You can go to my website, hyperionmarketing.co. That's Hyperion, just like the battleship from Borderlands. It's not related, but it's easy way to remember to spell it. Also, I don't really have a whole lot of other socials to pitch right now. I used to pitch people on X sorry, I can't believe I just said that on X. Twitter. I'm calling it Twitter. It's not X.
It's getting
I don't care what Elon's.
Yeah,
I don't even care what Elon says. I used to have a Twitter. I don't do that anymore because I don't want to be on there anymore. You can find me on LinkedIn too. Just search for Tom Caprel. I'm the younger one. My dad's got the same name, so easy enough.
Okay, cool. Well, Tom, thank you again so much for being on. Thank you everybody for watching. A reminder, you can go to The Sandbox. Don't forget the Sandbox.Space and sign up for our weekly email list, which includes a link to this podcast, as well as all of the articles that we talk about in the show. And some community events, and occasionally I was doing a blog post every week, and then it just became too much. So occasionally I do a blog post by myself or guests. And then of course, go to thegdex.com to keep on top of that. We got a lot of announcements coming out for GDEX. So we would love to have you there. But this has been episode 25 of the Sandbox.Space weekly podcast. As always, I am your host, Chris, joined by Baby and Pumpkin, who are over there taking nappers. Special guest Tom, thank you again. And of course, we do this every week on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on our Twitch, which is twitch.tv/thegdex. So please watch, spread the word, and we will see you all next week.